It's late winter, and this is a good time to prune a lot of our fruit trees and fruiting vines like this muscadine right here. Now, muscadine is popular in Louisiana. It's called the grape of the South, and with good reason. They grow well here, typically better than grapes do without some of the issues they've got. Now, the pruning is going to be a little bit different than grapes, and I want to show you here how to do this. Here you see a muscadine that we're kind of partway through pruning, and you can see to my right a lot of unwieldy, unruly vines that were pruned last year but haven't seen a pair of pruners in about a year. And then on my left side is an area that we're just about done pruning, and I'm going to show you how to get from point A to point B. It's not very complicated. Have a good, sharp, clean pair of pruners. The general idea is that we're trying to remove a lot of the volume of the vines running through here. A muscadine has a main trunk and then, like a grape, cordons going off to the sides. Cordons are just these big, thick, structural branches that we typically train onto a vine. You can do a 2-wire system where you'd have 4 cordons coming off, or you can use one vine and have just a pair of cordons coming off. And in this case, we've got the 2 cordons going left and right here. Like grapes, muscadines are vigorous growers. As soon as the weather starts to warm up in the spring, every one of these little buds is going to start to make a vine coming out. Those vines will have tendrils on them, grab on, and you can see with everything kind of tangled together like this, these would overrun each other, they would outshade each other, we wouldn't have enough air flow through, and these are all good reasons to prune. We're going to remove a lot of this volume. The most obvious thing is anything you see diseased or problematic, you'll take out. That includes tendrils that have grown onto other parts, so we want to get those loose from each other. You can see this one hanging on, so we're going to snip it off and toss that to the side. Old clusters from last year, those are going to come off. So coming off the main cordon here, you've got a spur. This little highly branched area is referred to as a spur. And we really want 2 or 3 buds on each shoot. Those individual shoots come off the main spur. We've got a little bit tangled right here, so I'm going to take this one off. And these have already been shortened. I think we're going to maybe take one more off and then leave the rest of this alone. So the cordon is kind of considered last year's wood, and muscadines fruit on last year's wood. The new shoots are going to be fresh this year, of course, but it will go ahead and fruit as long as it's not a new spur coming off the cordon. So each little shoot is going to have 2 or 3 buds. Each of those is going to grow out, and that's where the majority of your muscadines will come from in summer. We want to leave about 4 to 6 inches between spurs on this main cordon. So a good way to measure that is just take your hand and try to put it between 2 spurs. And if your hands are touching another spur coming off that cordon, then that's probably one that you can go ahead and remove. So you want to make a cut close to the cordon itself, back to its nearest juncture, never cut mid-spur. So that little wound will heal over the next several months, and you won't even barely see it a year from now. Another thing we want to prune for is vines that cross over each other, or shoots that are crossing over each other. They will cross to some extent, especially when this starts becoming a lot more bushy in late spring. But when you've got vines coming across and tangling, you want to remove one of those. So you kind of choose one, and I'm going in here and finding this one, sort of pull it out, trace it back a bit, and snip it back to its point of origin. These shoots right here are coming from the base of the vine, and we don't want them coming out right there, so we're going to trace them all back to where they came from and snip them out. Never prune mid-branch. Always try to trace something back to its point of origin, or at least to another bud that can come grow out and cover that wound that you've just made. As I mentioned, late winter is a good time to prune a lot of our fruit trees and vines. Some people like to prune in fall. October to November is not a bad time to prune muscadines. The danger in pruning at that time of year is that the pruning combined with warm weather can initiate new growth coming out of the vine. And then if you get a cold snap, say in midwinter, and there's that fresh growth on there, it's more susceptible to freeze. The advantage to pruning in fall over late winter is that in fall you don't get this weeping. Now, there's a little juice coming out of this cut right here. It's not severe on this particular one. That weeping is not actually detrimental to the plant, but some people don't like it, maybe it makes you nervous or whatever, and so you don't get that nearly as much if you do this pruning in the fall. As we're removing vines from this muscadine, you might not want to throw them all away. It's actually pretty easy to propagate muscadines from cuttings. Cut it down to about 6 or 8 inches long. Pay attention to which side is up. The leaf scar is just under the bud. And you take several of these and put them all in, say, about a gallon pot together, about halfway into the soil, halfway up. In another month or so, 2 months maybe, these buds will start growing out. You'll see leaves coming out of them, and you'll see which ones are still alive. Usually a majority of them will go ahead and leaf out. Once they've leafed out, give them a few more weeks so that they've presumably got some roots that they've got, and take them out of that original gallon-sized pot and separate them all into their own gallon-sized pot, each with just a bit of the same potting soil you used in the original mix. Baby them for a while and save them till the fall, and they ought to be of a pretty decent size, and you can plant more muscadines or give them away to friends. Late winter, as I said, is time to prune, but then early spring is time to fertilize. Muscadines don't really demand a lot of fertilizer. For a vine this size, a mature vine, probably about 2 or 3 pounds of a triple 13 or triple 8 type balanced fertilizer is going to be sufficient. Make sure you kill all the grass away from the roots like we do with any of our other fruit producing vines or trees, and that goes a long way for competition in summer, especially when it rains. You don't want this grass to get the rain first. You want it to go right to the roots. Ditto for the fertilizer and everything else we're putting down. That'll take care of 90% of your problems with muscadines. They're usually very maintenance-free vines.